Okay, so let's now talk about this next one called the acid test ratio, also known as the quick ratio. And let's go back to our diagram over here. I'll dump this and then write it out again. So we have, let me change the color. So we have this current assets. So we have let's have some trade. Let's have some inventory. 2 million. Trade receivables. 5 million. Cash. 4 million. And then we have current liabilities, trade payables. No, sorry. Let's have cash. No, not 4 million for cash. Let's have cash at 1 million. And let's have trade payables at 4 million. Now again, overall, when you look at this, you have here 8 million, and here you have 4. So the current ratio is 2 to 1, right? For every pound we owe, we have 2 pounds available. Why? Because 8 to 4, if I bring this down to ratio language, is 2 to 1. So we're comfortable. But let's examine this a bit more. Let's go in a little and see what's really happening here. I was talking about ice the other day on the other lecture. And the argument is we have to sometimes think, well, what is the hardest asset here to get rid of? In the same way, if someone said to you, if you had somehow, strangely enough, included buildings in this argument, if you really had to pay your trade payables, you wouldn't sell your buildings. In the same way, the hardest asset typically to get rid of is the inventory. So we have to assume that what if we couldn't sell off inventory in time? What if this guy turns up in the middle of the night and wants his money, and we don't have the ability to sell off our inventory? Well, we sort of say, well, because inventory is the hardest asset to get rid of, we will then have to focus on trade receivables and cash to pay off the trade payables. So what we now have is a situation where we have only 6 million available to pay for. So you can see it's actually falling in terms of, I mean, that's why it's, I guess, called the acid test. It's sort of more pushing you to the limits to see. So that it's a 6 to sort of 4, which is a 1.5 to 1. So it's saying that ultimately, if you can't sell your inventory, well, for every pound you owe, you only have 1.5 million available. Now remember, these are just ratios, because you can argue this. You can say, but Oyen, what if you can't get the money from your trade receivables straight away? Then you're in real trouble because you only have £1 million worth of cash. And that leaves you, if you're only trying to focus cash to what you owe, it's actually the other way. For every pound you owe, you only have 25p available to pay it, right? Because that's the ratio. 1 to 4 is 0.25 to 1. So ultimately, you can see that this what we're doing here is measuring how well we can meet our short-term liabilities in the short term. So what have we said? We are saying that we have what's referred to as the current ratio, which looks at all the current assets over all the current liabilities, and then we have the acid test ratio, which looks at the current assets, take away inventory, and compare that with the current liabilities. And then you're on to something. You can then compare between years, or compare between different companies, or compare with the industry to get an idea of how that business is actually doing. Okay, great stuff. So I mean, just one final thing. I mean, you could have a strange scenario like this. Let's just look at this. Current assets. You could have inventory, 2 million. Trade receivables, 2 million. And cash, 50 million. And you have trade payables, 2 million. Now, this is a strange scenario because the current assets are 54, and that's 2 million. I mean, this is extremely heavy. But is this a great scenario? Because I know the argument is we want current assets to be more, but how much more? What should we be doing with this cash? We probably should be investing it in inventory and selling it to make profit. I mean, the only reason you keep cash in your bank, for this amount of cash, that's disproportionately greater than your trade payables is if you're a bank or something like that. I don't know. But the key point is that, ultimately, you're in given money to invest it in inventory and make profit on. That's why the shareholders have invested in it. Okay, great stuff. So that brings us to the end of our liquidity ratios. And in the next videos, we will commence on to our efficiency ratios. All right, see you then.